Hi, Bruce. It's a pleasure to see you, and I sincerely appreciate your taking the time to speak with our students.
Well, hello, John. It's a pleasure for me, too, and I'm very glad to be with you.
We've been talking with the students about various aspects of the immune system and indicated that one of the exciting discoveries in the past decade has been toll-like receptors. And so maybe you can share with us some of the reflections as to what drove your research, what were you looking for, and if there were any surprises and discoveries?
Yes, I'll be glad to. One of the questions that intrigued me in medicine was the problem of gram-negative septic shock. I saw many patients like that, and I was well aware that endotoxin is a big part of that. I began to work on the isolation of a cytokine, which we called cachectin, but in the fullness of time it became known as tumor necrosis factor, or TNF. And the protocol for producing this cytokine was simply to treat macrophages with endotoxin, with LPS. And I recognized that it was a major mediator of endotoxicity. It caused inflammation. But the big question in my mind as I began to think about that whole model system was just how is endotoxin working? What receptor does it have? I decided that I wanted to find the receptor for LPS using TNF as the marker to follow, the response marker. There was a genetic approach open to me because since the year 1965 or so, it had been known that there were certain mice that were refractory to LPS. It was presumed that these mice might have a mutation in the LPS receptor. And if I could find the mutation, then we would know what the receptor was. And it took us about 5 years to track down the mutation. And in the end, we did find the mutation. We found it was in an orphan receptor called toll-like receptor 4. And with that, we knew that TLR4 was almost certainly the physical receptor for LPS. But this was really a thrilling time of my life, I have to say, when you look for something that you know must be there, and yet it's very hard to find. You develop a kind of obsession about it. And I must say I even would dream about it at night sometimes, that I had found the mutation. I remember on one occasion writing down...
Were these nightmares?
Not at all, quite the opposite. They were euphoric experiences. But when I woke up in the morning, the answer was never really sensible.
Where does LPS actually exist? Why is it necessarily such a universal and important molecule?
LPS is a structural element of gram-negative bacteria. Essentially all gram-negative bacteria have LPS. The toxicity of LPS varies. Some LPS structures don't actually activate TLR4 at all, but most of them do. And so with one receptor, our innate immune system is able to cover a good portion of the microbial world, that is to say, maybe about half of all bacteria that we might ever encounter. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about pattern recognition receptors, if we want to call them that. We have rather a limited number of them, a few dozen of them, and we may not have found every single one, but the number is not enormous. And it reminds me of the situation with the elements. We know there are just 92 natural elements in the universe, and yet everything in the universe is made of those 92 elements, from ice cream to baboons, or whatever you want to think of as different ends of the spectrum. And here we have a similar situation. We have this limited collection of receptors that are expected to protect us against almost any microbe, from protozoa to viruses. And they do a remarkably good job of it.
I see. Now, we've mentioned the fact that LPS is predominantly in the bacterial world, but does innate immunity also protect us against viruses?
Very definitely, yes. Some toll-like receptors detect nucleic acids. TLR9 detects single-stranded DNA, for example, and double-stranded RNA is detected by TLR3. And then there are cytoplasmic sensors of nucleic acids too. And the end point of all of these responses, whatever initiates them, is the interferon response, the type 1 interferon response, which leads to the induction of hundreds of molecules. And from that point, it's largely a mystery exactly how the viruses are selectively controlled, but evidently it does happen.
Bruce, I want to thank you very much. It's been very helpful and very interesting.
Well, it's really been a pleasure for me, and I'll look forward to watching the whole series of classes
well,
you're making.
Good. You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Bye-bye.